I'm Nate Eaton, and today we're talking with Congressman Mike Simpson from Idaho's 2nd Congressional District. Of course, his name is on the ballot next month on Election Day, running against Democrat Wendy Norman. Congressman, thanks for stopping by.
Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. Let's talk about a few things. The number one thing that I'm hearing is about the economy and inflation. I was meeting with a restaurant owner just an hour ago here in Idaho Falls. She said the price of pork a year or so ago was $2, shot up to $6.
Yeah.
Now it's around $4.
Yeah.
How do we deal with this? How do you deal with this?
First thing that's driving inflation more than anything else, two things. One is gas prices. We got to make ourselves energy independent again, which we were 2 years ago. And then when Biden was first elected, his first action was to declare war on the oil industry. And guess what? Prices of oil go up, and that's what's happened with gas prices. That's driving some of the inflation. The other thing is the incredible amount of spending that the Democratic majority has been doing over the last couple of years. They've spent like $7 trillion in addition to our regular appropriation bills on infrastructure, on the CHIPS bill, on the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, you just add it all up, and it's an enormous input of cash into the market, and that causes inflation. You have too many dollars chasing too few goods.
So what happens next? How do you get that under control, and will prices go back down?
Well, I think we can get prices back down if we can get ourselves back on an all of the above energy policy that reduces our reliance on foreign oil and OPEC and those kind of things. Don't you find it kind of strange that the first action is we're going to punish oil producers in the United States, and then we're going to go beg Saudi Arabia and Venezuela to produce more oil? I mean, that's just strange, because we do it better in this country than anywhere, and more environmentally safe in this country than anywhere else in the world. So why wouldn't we use our own energy in this country? Natural gas is, we're the Saudi Arabia of natural gas, and yet getting wells drilled and that type of stuff is almost impossible nowadays. So you do that, and you do that by getting control of your budget and spending less money. And one of the challenges we're going to have is people have gotten used to all this spending that's going on, whether it's trying to relieve student loans, $20,000 each, and all that kind of stuff. We're going to have a time bringing the spending down, which is what we're going to have to do. So I'll tell you, next session, if the Republicans take majority, it's going to be a tough time, because we're going to have to make some tough choices, but they've got to be made, and we've got to get our budget back under control.
Do you foresee Republicans taking majority on Senate and the House?
Every indication is right now we will in the House. By a pretty good majority, I think. In the Senate, it's a little iffy. Right now, the numbers look like we probably will by 1 or 2 votes. But in the Senate, you only need 51 votes to be in the majority, obviously. You're not going to get 60 votes to overcome a filibuster, so you're still going to have that challenge. People think that we will be able to go in and change the direction that the country is headed if they elect a Republican majority, but you're still going to have a Biden administration. And we won't have 60 votes to override, to get past the Senate. So it's going to be more difficult. One of the best things we can do, and what we will probably do, is restrict the spending and restrict some of the rules and regulations that that this administration is publishing, that is hurting our economy. And we do that by saying none of the funds in this bill and our appropriation bills can be used for this purpose or that purpose or whatever. And that puts some sideboards on this administration that's been able to just run free for the last 2 years.
Well, give this administration a letter grade, in your opinion, so far.
Really? I'd give it an F. I mean, I really would. I can't think of a thing that I think has been a positive from this administration, whether it's control of our southern border, whether it's inflation in our economy, whether it's crime in our cities, any of those things, any of the major issues that you look at with this country. You look at our foreign policy. Nobody respects us anymore. So what do you look at that you say, yeah, they've done a good job there? That bothers me.
Let's talk about Idaho, the breaching of the 4 lower Snake River dams, which was a proposal you came up with 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
They estimate $33.5 billion in federal spending to breach in the year 2030, and that cost includes to replace the transportation, irrigation, and power generation that will happen if you do breach them. Your critics say that if this happens, life as we know it in our region would cease to exist, saying that those dams cause power to half of the Pacific Northwest's energy. Why? Explain your position, why you want to do this.
Well, you've got 4 Idaho salmon runs that are endangered. They have been since 1995. They're going to go extinct if we don't do something. We have tried everything else. And when we started looking at this issue and how we could solve it, every fish biologist that we talked to said, listen, we've tried everything else. The only thing that will work is removing the lower 4 Snake River dams. And I asked the people in my district in southern Idaho, what benefits do you get from the dams? Good question. Do you get lower power rates? Not necessarily. You can buy power on the open market cheaper than you can buy it from Bonneville Power Administration right now. And a lot of the rural electrics are looking at that now. And when their contracts come due, I think they're going to be looking at the open market and not at Bonneville Power. But when you look at the power production, those dams do have a value. The cost of the $33 billion that we estimate, most of it is replacing those benefits and making the stakeholders whole. It's not breaching the dams. You can do that relatively cheaply. You have to do some dredging behind them to get rid of the silt, a few things like that. And then breaching is not all that expensive to do. But to replace the power, that's going to take some money. Out of the total power produced by the Bonneville Power Administration, only 4% of it comes from those 4 dams. 4% of the total power in the Pacific Northwest. Idaho receives about 8% of that 4%. So not very much. We can replace that power with other means like small modular reactors, other types of things, pump storage. There's a lot of different ways to produce power now. When those dams were built, they were built mainly for power for the Hanford nuclear reactor, nuclear site. And at that time, if you needed the power, you either built a coal-fired plant or you built a hydro plant. And they chose hydro, which made sense at the time. But now there's so many ways to replace that power that you can replace it without any difficulty. Transportation's another issue. Farmers in northern Idaho barge grain and so forth down the river, which is the cheapest form of transportation. You're going to have to replace that benefit that they receive from that, which is subsidized transportation, by the way. But in southern Idaho, we don't barge. Our grain, we put it on trucks and we take it to Ogden. So we don't get any benefits from that. And I keep asking my constituents, okay, let's list all the benefits we get from those dams. We also send 487,000 acre-feet of water out of southern Idaho every year to flush salmon over the dams. That was an experiment to see if it would work. It hasn't. But that's still 487,000 acre-feet of water we lose every year. Water we could be using to irrigate crops in southern Idaho, that's equivalent to about 150,000 acres of potatoes. If you're not going to irrigate with it, you could recharge our aquifer. And you know the drought we're in right now and the challenge we're having with irrigators, ground and surface and groundwater pumpers, and the challenges we're having there. We're going to have some water restrictions if this drought continues and stuff. Is it really smart to be sending 487,000 acre-feet of water down the river every year to flush salmon over dams to keep them from going extinct, which isn't working? So I ask my constituents, if you've got another plan that works, that has a chance of saving the salmon, let me know what it is. So far I haven't heard anything. And I don't think the Endangered Species Act is gonna allow these salmon to go extinct. And you're gonna have a judge make that decision rather than us making the decision of what do we want the Pacific Northwest to look like in 25 or 50 years, because the decisions we make now will be the decisions that'll make that determination. So it is controversial. We knew when we introduced it, it would be controversial. We haven't introduced a bill, we've introduced a plan. And then I wanted a discussion in the entire Pacific Northwest, talk about how are we going to solve this problem? Because it is a problem.
And people are discussing it.
Yeah, and they are discussing it.
Yeah.
And besides that, a lot of people don't understand the economic benefit that salmon has. This is not just saving a fish, this is the economy. Outfitters and Guides is about a $2 billion industry in Idaho. I can remember when I was a kid, you used to go up to Riggins and you couldn't stand on the shore. There were so many fishermen there fishing salmon. That doesn't happen anymore because we don't have any salmon runs anymore. They're down so low that they cancel the fishing season most of the times. So it can be done, but it does take a change. And it's not as dramatic as some people would think. But again, it is a challenging issue. But the discussion certainly has started.
So many people say they're fed up with DC.
Yeah.
They're fed up with the politicians. They don't pay attention really to it.
Yeah.
They care about, food on their table. What would you say to those people that have lost faith in our federal government, in government in general, in politicians in general?
Some of it's justified. There's too much partisanship that goes on in Washington, D.C. One of my goals is to try to reduce that partisanship, where you can get together and work with people across the aisle on issues that you have common goals in and stuff. And we can do that, but right now it's just totally partisan. And that's unfortunate. That's
Have
not
you
good.
seen it like this before?
Not as bad as it is now. But the way we got here, frankly, is for 40 years Democrats controlled Congress. Then in 1994, Republicans took over. And the if you control something for 40 years, pretty soon you're going to be, thanks for showing up, boys, and we're going to do whatever we want. And I understand that. That's kind of the way the world works. But when we took over in 1994, they said, okay, now we're going to get even with the way the Democrats treated us. And then in 2006, the Democrats took over and they said, now we're going to get even with the Republicans, and it just keeps escalating. We've got to stop that. Revenge politics doesn't work. It's not good for either party. It's not good for the country. We got to get together and start working together. But it's not just the politicians in Washington, D.C. The American public are split. You see some of the uncivility that happens in this country, and it's a little scary. And we've got to get people talking with one another. You don't have to agree with people, but talk to one another. Find out why somebody thinks the way they do. And I want to see Congress get back to that. Whether we can get there or not, I don't know. Because we're going to have some people, if we take the majority, we're going to have some people that want to get even with the Democrats, and that's the wrong way to head, I think.
Congressman, thanks so much for coming in.
You bet. It's always
Good
great to
seeing
be
you.
with you.